As you know, the big thing is that having celebrated my 90th birthday, that I speak obviously from a lot of experience, and I think that's lacking sometimes today with some preachers. They're speaking a great deal on theory. Mine's not theory. I've lived what I'm talking about, and it works. That's the big thing. You see, I'm going to concentrate today on something really that follows on from what I'm saying, because if you listen to me, you'll find that there is an underlying trend through it all. There's it's all sort of linked one thing to another. But if I introduce the subject today by saying I want to talk about how you can have power in your life and power with God, to me that's very important. And I need to open, I'm going to concentrate mainly on Hebrews 11, but I want to start from the book of Ephesians. And if you haven't already seen my book on Ephesians, you should get on the website and buy it, because I'm only going to deal with a very small part of it. But to me, the epistle to the Ephesians is very powerful, very striking, and probably one of the most spiritual books in the Bible. And so if you're interested in the spiritual side, it's only £5. I suggest you get it. Anyway, I'm looking at Ephesians chapter 1, and I'm going to read a little bit here that Paul, as an apostle, speaking about the blessing and the power of Jesus, who has predestinated us unto the adoption of children. That's what God has done through Christ. In Christ we have redemption through his blood, verse 7. Verse 8, he abounds to us in wisdom and prudence. In 9, he's making known unto the mystery of his will. Now, that all comes out in the book, but the point that I'm making is that in verse 11 it says, in whom we have, that's Christ, in whom we have obtained an inheritance. And this is available in verse 12, that we should become to the praise of his glory. Now, this to me is very significant, that Paul is saying that we, in our living, should be glory to Christ. That's first interesting. But it says that we should be to the praise of his glory, who first trusted in Christ. Now, I'm reading this particularly because I'm going to be talking about faith. But here very clearly is referring to another word which describes faith. And this is very, very critical, because faith is trust. And without trust, you don't have faith. I like to describe it in this way simply because a lot of people don't really understand what faith is in the spiritual context. People are referred to as, if they're religious, they're called people of faith. I find that is not an adequate description. In fact, I would say that using the word in that way demeans or diminishes the effectiveness of what faith really is. So here, Paul is speaking about it not as faith, but as trust. And to me, faith and trust are so closely linked, because faith is when you trust somebody. Trust is when you have faith in somebody. If I trust somebody, I have faith in them. You understand the correlation between the two words. And so he goes on, he says that we should be to the praise of his glory, who first trusted in Christ. That's the faith that brings salvation. Verse 13, in whom also you trusted after you heard the word of truth. In other words, in whom you also believed after you heard of the word of the truth, the gospel of your salvation. So I want you to understand that faith and trust have a great deal in common. Now, I'm saying that before I go on to my main theme, which is the power which comes simply through faith. And if I turn to the most famous chapter, which most of us are aware of, on faith, which is Hebrews chapter 11. But if I look at Hebrews chapter 10, it brings another word in to describe faith. Because if you look at verse 35 in Hebrews 10, it says, cast not away your confidence, which has great reward. Now here, confidence in effect is another description of faith. Because you can have faith in someone when you have confidence in them. I'm seeing that you trust a person because you've got faith in them. You have confidence in a person because you've got trust in them and you've got faith in them. So here, Paul is contrasting what he says in Ephesians, and here writing to the Hebrews, he's talking about confidence, and he says, don't throw away your confidence. Now, that's a challenge. Don't throw away your faith. I don't hear preachers talking like this, but I want to remind you that faith is a gift. Faith comes from God because our faith is in God. But really, we must not lose that faith. That's what Paul is really saying, that we should not cast away the confidence because it has a great reward. Now, faith has reward, and I'm going to be talking about that in a moment. Faith has a reward, and that's very significant, because he goes on in the same strain by verse 38 in chapter 10, he's saying, now the just will live by faith. So again, here is the confidence translated as faith. And it speaks about drawing back from this faith. Now, the Bible is very clear that we live by faith.